In the far reaches of the galaxy, nestled among the stars, stood the renowned Galactic Institute of Xenobiology. Within its hallowed halls, brilliant minds from countless worlds gathered to study the mysteries of life in all its myriad forms. Among these esteemed scholars was Professor Zeke Slicks, a veteran xenobiologist known for his daring expeditions to the universe's most perilous planets. As the academic cycle began anew, Professor Zeke Slicks found himself standing before a class of eager young students, each hailing from a different corner of the cosmos. The lecture hall buzzed with excitement as the diverse array of beings, some gaseous, others crystalline, and a few even hailing from the realm of pure energy, awaited the professor's words. "Welcome," Professor Zeke Slicks began, his voice translated into a multitude of languages by the room's sophisticated audio system, to advanced xenobiology, Deathworld studies. In this course, we will explore the most lethal, inhospitable planets known to sentient life. And today, we embark on our most ambitious venture yet, a field expedition to the infamous planet Earth. A collective gasp rippled through the classroom. Earth's reputation as a death world was well known throughout the galaxy. Tales of its deadly fauna, extreme weather patterns, and unpredictable geological activity had long been the stuff of legend. "But Professor," interjected Kix Vix, a shimmering, translucent being from the nebula cluster, "isn't Earth classified as a Class 12 death world? The mortality rate for off-world visitors is astronomical." Professor Zeke Slicks's eye stalks swiveled to regard Kix Vix. "Indeed, Earth is a formidable challenge. But that is precisely why we must study it. To truly understand the universe, we must confront its most extreme expressions of life. And," he added with a mischievous glint in his compound eyes, "I have a secret weapon for our expedition, a human guide." The revelation sent shockwaves through the class. A human guide. The notion seemed preposterous. Humans were notoriously reckless, their survival instincts dulled by eons of adaptation to their death world home. As if on cue, the lecture hall doors slid open, revealing a tall, bipedal figure. The human strode in, a confident grin on its face. "Hello, everyone," it said, its voice carrying a strange, alien cadence. "I'm Commander Jack Stevens, and I'll be your guide on this little adventure." Commander Stevens proceeded to detail the expedition itinerary, describing the various Earth biomes they would visit and the safety precautions they would take. The students listened, equal parts enthralled and terrified, as the human spoke casually of venomous creatures, crushing gravitational forces, and the ever-present threat of microbial infection. "But don't worry," Commander Stevens assured them, "with proper preparation and a healthy dose of caution, we'll all make it back in one piece." "Probably." The students exchanged nervous glances, their various appendages twitching with apprehension. But beneath the fear, a thrill of excitement pulsed. They were about to embark on the adventure of a lifetime, a journey to the very edges of known possibility. As the lecture drew to a close, Professor Zeke Slicks addressed the class once more. "Remember, students, this expedition is not for the faint of heart. Earth will test you in ways you cannot imagine. But if you can survive its trials, you will emerge as true xenobiologists, ready to unravel the secrets of the universe itself." With those words ringing in their minds, the students filed out of the lecture hall, each lost in thought about the challenges that lay ahead. In just a few short cycles, they would depart for Earth, the death world that had captured the galaxy's imagination. And they would discover, firsthand, the true meaning of survival in the face of overwhelming odds. As the ship hurtled through the void of space, its occupants busied themselves with final preparations for planetfall. Professor Zeke Slicks pored over sensor readings, his eye stalks darting from one data point to another. Commander Stevens conducted final equipment checks, ensuring each student's environment suit was in perfect working order. Amidst the flurry of activity, the students huddled together, whispering excitedly about the adventures to come. Kix Vix and his nebula cluster brethren speculated about the strange, solid matter they would encounter on Earth's surface. The crystalline beings of the Diamond Consortium chattered about the potential effects of Earth's atmosphere on their faceted bodies. And the energy beings of the Photon Alliance simply pulsed with anticipation, eager to experience a world so different from their own. As Earth loomed ever larger in the viewports, its swirling clouds and shimmering oceans beckoning, Professor Zix called the students together for one final briefing. "Remember your training," he intoned, his voice grave. "Earth is a world of endless danger, but also of endless wonder. Keep your wits about you, trust in your equipment, and above all, listen to Commander Stevens. He is our guide and our best hope for survival." Commander Stevens nodded, his expression serious for once. "We'll be landing in a region known as the Amazon rainforest. It's one of Earth's most biodiverse areas, home to millions of species, many of them found nowhere else in the universe. But that diversity comes at a price. The rainforest is also home to some of Earth's deadliest predators, both animal and microbial. Stay alert, stay together, then if you see something move, don't touch it." The students nodded solemnly, their enthusiasm tempered by the gravity of the commander's words. This was no mere field trip, it was a journey into the heart of one of the universe's most unforgiving environments. As the ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, the students marveled at the riot of colors that greeted them, the lush greens of the rainforest canopy, the glittering blues of the mighty Amazon River, the riotous hues of the countless flowers and fruits that dotted the landscape. But as they drew closer, the true nature of the rainforest began to reveal itself. The canopy was a seething mass of life, each tree a towering fortress teeming with countless organisms locked in an endless dance of predator and prey. The air hummed with the buzz of insects, the cries of birds, the howls of unseen beasts. And then, with a final, shuddering jolt, the ship touched down on the forest floor. The students gathered at the airlock, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. "Welcome to Earth," Commander Stevens grinned, his hand poised over the airlock controls. "Let the adventure begin." And with that, the airlock hissed open, and the students took their first steps into the green hell of the Amazon rainforest. Little did they know, their true education was about to begin, a lesson in survival on a world where every breath, every step, every moment was a dance on the edge of oblivion. They had come to learn the secrets of life on Earth, but first, they would have to learn how to stay alive. The first thing that struck the students as they emerged from the airlock was the oppressive heat and humidity. Even through their environment suits, they could feel the weight of the air pressing down on them, thick and heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying vegetation. Commander Stevens led the way, his machete slicing through the dense undergrowth with practiced ease. The students followed in single file, their eyes wide with wonder and trepidation as they took in the alien landscape around them. Gargantuan trees towered overhead, their trunks wider than a dozen students standing side by side. Vines as thick as a human's arm snaked through the canopy, while delicate orchids and bromeliads clung to every available surface. The forest floor was a carpet of fallen leaves and twisting roots, each step an invitation to trip or stumble. And the sounds, the rainforest was alive with a cacophony of noises unlike anything the students had ever heard. The constant drone of insects, the distant cries of birds, the rustle of unseen creatures moving through the underbrush. It was a symphony of life, but one with an undercurrent of menace. As they trekked deeper into the forest, Professor Zix called out points of interest, his voice tinged with academic excitement. "Note the leaf structure of that Helioconia plant, students. Perfectly adapted for channeling rainwater to its roots. And there, a column of leaf-cutter ants, each one carrying a fragment of leaf many times its own body weight. Remarkable. But for every moment of scientific wonder, there was an equal measure of danger." A startled yelp from Kix Vix drew everyone's attention as a glistening, multi-legged creature the size of a dinner plate scuttled across the trail in front of him. "Giant centipede," Commander Stevens remarked casually. "Venomous, but not usually lethal to humans. Still, best to watch your step." The students exchanged nervous glances, suddenly acutely aware of every movement in the undergrowth around them. Each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig took on a new and terrifying significance. As they pressed on, the trail grew narrower and more treacherous. Roots and vines seemed to reach out to snag at their feet, while overhead the canopy grew so thick that only the barest dapples of sunlight penetrated to the forest floor. Suddenly, a piercing scream rent the air, followed by a flurry of movement in the canopy above. The students froze, their hearts pounding, as a troop of howler monkeys went crashing through the treetops, their eerie cries echoing through the forest. Just monkeys, Commander Stevens assured them, but even he seemed a bit unnerved by the sudden commotion. As the day wore on and the expedition pushed deeper into the rainforest, the students began to understand the true scope of the challenge they faced. Every moment was a test of endurance, every step a calculated risk. The very air seemed alive with unseen threats, from the tiniest microbe to the largest predator. And yet, even amidst the constant danger, there were moments of breathtaking beauty. A glimpse of a jaguar's spotted coat through the foliage, the iridescent flutter of a blue morpho butterfly, the delicate perfume of a rare orchid in bloom. It was a world of contrasts, of life and death intertwined in an intricate dance. And as the students began to grasp the complex web of relationships that wove the rainforest together, they started to understand why Earth was considered the ultimate proving ground for xenobiologists. Here, on this unforgiving planet, life had evolved to a level of complexity and resilience unmatched anywhere else in the known universe. To study it, to understand it, was to glimpse the very essence of what it meant to be alive. But the rainforest had more lessons to teach, and as the expedition ventured deeper into its green embrace, the students would soon learn that on Earth, even the most innocuous-looking creature could be deadly, and that survival often hung on the razor's edge of chance and instinct. The sun was beginning to sink below the canopy when Commander Stevens called for a halt. "We'll make camp here for the night," he announced, gesturing to a small clearing amid the towering trees. "Stay within the perimeter and don't wander off. The rainforest is a different beast entirely once night falls." The students set about erecting their shelter, a sleek, self-assembling structure that had been designed specifically for this expedition. As the silvery walls rose up from the forest floor, Commander Stevens busied himself with setting up a perimeter of sensor drones, small, floating spheres that would alert them to any approaching threats. Professor Zeke Slicks, meanwhile, was engrossed in analyzing the day's data, his eye stalks flicking rapidly between the glowing screens of his portable lab. "Remarkable," he muttered to himself. "The biodiversity readings are off the charts. This single hectare of rainforest contains more unique species than some entire planets." As darkness fell, the students gathered around the central campfire, its flickering light casting eerie shadows on the surrounding trees. For a moment, the familiar comfort of the flames made the alien world around them feel a little less daunting. But the respite was short-lived. As the night deepened, the rainforest came alive with a whole new array of sounds and sensations. The air was filled with the chirps, whistles, and croaks of countless nocturnal creatures, each one a potential predator or prey in the endless cycle of life and death. Suddenly, a piercing alarm shattered the night, sending the students scrambling for their environment suits. One of the sensor drones had detected movement at the perimeter, something big and moving fast. Commander Stevens was already on his feet, pulse rifle in hand. "Stay in the shelter," he barked, his voice tight with tension. "Professor, keep an eye on the sensors. I'm going to check it out." The students huddled together in the shelter, hearts pounding, as they watched Commander Stevens disappear into the darkness beyond the campfire's glow. Long, agonizing moments passed, punctuated only by the distant sounds of the rainforest and the hum of the shelter's life support systems. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the alarm fell silent. The students held their breath, straining to hear any signs of what had happened. Footsteps crunched on the leaf litter outside, and then Commander Stevens ducked back into the shelter, his face grim. "False alarm," he said, but there was an edge to his voice that suggested otherwise. "Probably just a curious jaguar. But we'll need to be extra vigilant from here on out. The deeper we go, the more dangerous it gets." As the adrenaline began to fade, exhaustion took hold. The students retreated to their sleeping pods, but sleep was slow to come. The events of the day played out in their minds, the wonders they had seen, the dangers they had faced, the realization of just how vulnerable they were in this alien environment. But as they drifted off one by one, a new emotion began to take hold, a fierce determination to rise to the challenge, to prove themselves worthy of this incredible opportunity. They were the brightest minds of their generation, handpicked for this mission. They would not let fear define them. As the shelter hummed softly around them, the students slept, their dreams filled with visions of the trials yet to come. Outside, the rainforest pulsed with the inexorable rhythms of life and death, an eternal dance in which they were now irrevocably intertwined. The expedition was not just a test of their knowledge and skills, it was a crucible that would forge them into something new, something unique in the annals of the galaxy. For in the heart of Earth's green hell, they would discover not just the secrets of this strange and deadly world, but the truth of who they really were. The dawn came early in the rainforest, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the canopy to dapple the forest floor with gold. As the students emerged from their sleeping pods, blinking away the last vestiges of slumber, they found Commander Stevens already up and about, brewing a potent concoction of earth-grown stimulants over the campfire. "Rise and shine, xenobiologists," he called out, his voice far too cheerful for the early hour. "We've got a big day ahead of us. Today, we are heading into the heart of the rainforest, to a place where even the most experienced Earth explorers fear to tread." Professor Zeke Slicks, who had been up for hours poring over the previous day's data, looked up from his screens with a worried frown. "Commander, are you sure that's wise? The risk assessment for that region is concerning, to say the least." Commander Stevens just grinned, his eyes glinting with a hint of something that might have been excitement or madness. "That's precisely why we are going there, Professor. To push the boundaries of what's possible. To go where no xenobiologist has gone before." As the students broke camp and prepared for the day's trek, a sense of unease began to settle over the group. They had known from the start that this expedition would test them to their limits, but the reality of just how far those limits might be stretched was starting to sink in. Still, they had come too far to turn back now. With a final check of their equipment and a murmured prayer to whatever deities or forces they believed in, the students fell into line behind Commander Stevens and Professor Zeke Slicks, ready to face whatever the rainforest might throw at them. As they trekked deeper into the jungle, the very landscape seemed to change around them. The trees grew taller, their trunks so wide that a dozen students could have stood hand in hand around their circumference. The air grew thicker, heavier, laden with the scent of 1,000 exotic blooms and the musk of unseen beasts. Even the light seemed different, filtered through layer upon layer of foliage until it took on an otherworldly, emerald hue. As they pushed onward, the students began to notice other changes as well. The animal sounds that had been a constant backdrop to their journey thus far seemed to fade away, replaced by an eerie, expectant silence. It was as if the rainforest itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what these strange, alien intruders would do next. Suddenly, a shout from the head of the line brought the group to a halt. Commander Stevens was standing at the edge of a vast clearing, his face a mask of awe and disbelief. As the students caught up to him, they saw what had brought him up short, and felt their own jaws drop in amazement. Before them lay a sight unlike anything they had ever seen, a vast, circular structure, its walls composed of living trees woven together in intricate, impossible patterns. At the center of the clearing, the towering spire rose up from the forest floor, its peak lost in the mists that swirled around its upper reaches. What is it?" Kix Vix breathed, his crystalline eyes wide with wonder. Professor Zix Lix shook his head, for once at a loss for words. I have no idea, he admitted. This structure, it's not like anything in the xenobiological records. It's almost as if it was built by something intelligent, Commander Stevens finished, his voice uncharacteristically somber. Something not human. A ripple of unease passed through the group at the commander's words. The idea of an unknown, intelligent species on Earth was unsettling, to say the least. The planet's reputation as a death world was bad enough, but the thought of facing an alien intelligence, one that had managed to survive and even thrive in this hostile environment. That was enough to send a chill down even the most hardened xenobiologist's spine. Still, they had come too far to turn back now. With a nod from Commander Stevens, the group began to make their way across the clearing towards the base of the towering structure. As they drew closer, the scale of the thing became even more apparent. Its walls soared hundreds of feet into the air, the living trees that composed them so tightly woven that not even a blade of grass could slip between them. The spire at the center was even taller, a twisting, organic skyscraper that seemed to defy the very laws of physics. At the base of the structure, a gaping archway yawned open, leading into a dark, cavernous interior. Commander Stevens paused at the threshold, his hand hovering over the butt of his pulse rifle. I don't like this, he muttered, more to himself than to the others. This feels like a trap. Professor Zix Lix, however, seemed lost in scientific curiosity. We must go inside, he insisted, his eye stalks quivering with excitement. This structure, it's unprecedented. The potential for new knowledge, for groundbreaking discoveries, we cannot turn back now. The students looked to Commander Stevens, their faces a mix of fear and anticipation. The commander hesitated for a long moment, his jaw working as he weighed the risks against the potential rewards. Finally, with a sigh of resignation, he nodded. All right, he said, but stay alert. We have no idea what we are walking into. With that, he stepped forward into the waiting darkness, the students and Professor Zix Lix following close behind. The interior of the structure was unlike anything they could have imagined. The floor was soft and spongy underfoot, composed of a dense mat of moss and fungus. The walls were lined with bioluminescent lichen, casting an eerie, pulsing glow over the cavernous space. And everywhere, the air was filled with a low, rhythmic thrumming, like the beating of an immense, alien heart. As they made their way deeper into the structure, the students began to notice other peculiarities. Strange, organic shapes protruded from the walls and ceiling, pods and protrusions that seemed to writhe and pulse with a life of their own. And there were other sounds too, beneath the thrumming, skittering, scrabbling noises that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. Suddenly, Kix Vix let out a yelp of surprise and fear. The others whirled around to see him staring at a dark, glistening shape that had emerged from one of the wall pods, a shape that was unmistakably insectoid, with far too many legs and eyes that glittered with alien intelligence. Commander Stevens had his pulse rifle up and aimed in an instant, but Professor Zix Lix held up a cautionary hand. Wait, he hissed, his voice barely above a whisper. Look. As they watched, the insectoid creature scuttled forward, its movements jerky and erratic. It paused a few feet away from Kix Vix, its antennae twitching as it seemed to size up the crystalline xenobiologist. Then, with a sudden, decisive motion, it darted forward, snatched something from the ground at Kix Vix's feet, and scurried back into the wall pod from whence it had come. It took a moment for the students to process what had just happened. Then, as one, they looked down at the ground where the creature had grabbed its prize, and saw a scattering of small, glittering objects, like tiny jewels strewn across the mossy floor. Professor Zix Lix bent down to examine one of the objects, his eye stalks quivering with excitement. Fascinating, he breathed, holding up the tiny, crystalline structure to the light. These appear to be data storage devices of some kind. Organic technology, but incredibly advanced. This is beyond anything we've encountered before. Commander Stevens, however, looked less than thrilled by the discovery. I don't like this, he muttered, his eyes darting around the cavernous space. Whatever these creatures are, they are intelligent. And they are watching us. We need to be careful. As if to punctuate his words, a sudden, piercing shriek echoed through the structure, sending the students scrambling for cover. Commander Stevens had his rifle up and ready in an instant, scanning the shadows for any sign of threat. But the attack, when it came, was from an entirely unexpected quarter. One of the wall pods behind them suddenly burst open, disgorging a writhing mass of insectoid bodies that swarmed towards the huddled xenobiologists like a living tide. Commander Stevens opened fire, his pulse rounds cutting through the swarm like a scythe. But for every creature he felled, a dozen more seemed to take its place, skittering and leaping over the bodies of their fallen comrades in a relentless, inexorable advance. "Run!" the commander yelled, his voice barely audible over the deafening chitter of the swarm. "Back to the entrance, now." The students needed no further urging. They turned and fled, their hearts pounding in their chests as they raced back through the twisting, alien corridors of the structure. Behind them, the swarm chittered and screeched, the sound of their pursuit echoing off the living walls in a nightmarish cacophony. They burst out of the entrance in a stumbling, panicked rush, blinking in the sudden, blinding light of the clearing. Behind them, the swarm boiled out of the structure like a living, chitinous flood, a seething mass of mandibles and glittering, alien eyes. "To the trees!" Commander Stevens yelled, his rifle still barking in controlled bursts as he covered their retreat. "Climb in now!" The students scrambled for the nearest trunks, their claws and tentacles scrabbling for patches on the rough, living bark. They hauled themselves up into the canopy, their movements fueled by sheer, adrenaline-soaked terror. Below them, the swarm chittered and seethed, the living carpet of insectoid bodies that stretched from the base of the structure to the edge of the clearing. Commander Stevens stood alone at the center of the maelstrom, his rifle blazing as he fought to keep the creatures at bay. But it was a losing battle, and he knew it. With a final, defiant burst of fire, he turned and ran, leaping for the nearest tree trunk and hauling himself up into the canopy with the skill of a born climber. The swarm boiled up the trunk after him, a living, chittering tide that seemed to defy gravity itself. But Commander Stevens was faster, leaping from branch to branch with a speed and agility that seemed superhuman. At last, he reached the upper canopy where the students huddled, their eyes wide with fear and shock. "Keep going," he yelled, his voice rugged with exertion. "Don't stop until you reach the ship." And so they ran, leaping and swinging through the treetops like arboreal acrobats, the chittering swarm always just behind them. It was a mad, desperate flight, a race against an enemy that seemed to embody the very essence of the rainforest itself, relentless, implacable, and utterly alien. But at last, after what seemed like an eternity of terror and exertion, they burst out of the tree line and into the clearing where their ship stood waiting, its silvery hull glinting in the sun like a beacon of hope. They scrambled aboard, Commander Stevens bringing up the rear, his rifle still spitting fire at the pursuing swarm. He slammed the airlock shut behind them, the thick, metallic clang of the door sealing them off from the nightmare outside. For a long moment, they simply stood there, panting and shaking, their minds struggling to process the horror they had just witnessed. Then, as if by unspoken agreement, they all turned to look at each other, their faces a mix of shock, relief, and grim determination. They had survived their first true test on this alien world, but they knew, with a certainty that chilled them to the bone, that it would not be their last. The rainforest had shown them just a glimpse of the horrors it held in store, and they knew, deep in their hearts, that they had barely begun to scratch the surface. But they were xenobiologists, the best and brightest of their generation. They had come to this world to learn, to discover, to push the boundaries of what was possible. And they would not be deterred, not by the swarm, not by the death world that sought to claim them at every turn. For they were explorers, pioneers, the vanguard of a new age of discovery. And they would not rest until they had unlocked the secrets of this strange, deadly, and endlessly fascinating world, no matter the cost. As the ship lifted off, the students gathered around the viewports, watching as the green hell of the rainforest receded beneath them. Professor Zix was already poring over the data they had collected, his eye stalks quivering with barely contained excitement. The implications of this discovery are staggering, he breathed, his voice trembling with awe. An intelligent, technologically advanced species, right here on Earth, it changes everything. Commander Stevens, nursing a plasma burn on his shoulder where a stray shot had grazed him, just grunted. Intelligent, sure, he muttered, but friendly. Not so much. Kix Vix, still shaken from his close encounter with the insectoid creature, nodded in agreement. What do you think they wanted with us? He asked, his crystalline eyes wide with fear and wonder. Who knows? Commander Stevens shrugged, wincing as the motion pulled at his wound. But I'll tell you one thing, we got off lucky. If those things had really wanted to kill us, we'd be bug food by now. The thought sent a shiver down the spines of the assembled xenobiologists. They had come to Earth expecting danger, but nothing could have prepared them for the sheer, primal terror of the swarm, the feeling of being hunted by an intelligence as vast and alien as the rainforest itself. And yet, even as they shuddered at the memory, they felt a strange, undeniable thrill as well. They had faced the unknown and survived, had stared into the face of the abyss and come back changed, but unbroken. They were xenobiologists, after all, and the lure of discovery, of pushing the boundaries of the possible, was a siren song that could never be ignored. They had tasted the forbidden fruit of knowledge, and now, there was no going back. As the ship climbed higher into the sky, the students began to chatter excitedly among themselves, already planning their next foray into the green hell below. They would be more cautious next time, more prepared, but they would not be deterred. For they had seen the truth of this world, had glimpsed the secrets that lay hidden beneath its deadly, alluring surface. And they knew, with a certainty that burned like fire in their hearts, that they would not rest until they had unlocked them all, no matter the danger, no matter the cost. The xenobiologists had come to Earth looking for knowledge, but they had found something far greater, far more profound. They had found purpose, the calling that would drive them forward into the unknown, no matter where it might lead. And as the ship vanished into the clouds, the jungle below seemed to shiver with anticipation, as if it too could sense the change that was coming, the dawn of a new era, a time when the secrets of the death world would be laid bare at last, and the universe would never be the same again. The journey back to the institute was a blur of excited chatter and feverish speculation. The students huddled around their data pads, poring over the readings and recordings they had taken during their desperate flight from the swarm. Professor Zix was in his element, his eye stalks quivering with barely contained excitement as he outlined theory after theory about the nature and origin of the insectoid creatures. Were they a natural part of Earth's ecosystem, some kind of hyper-evolved hive species that had developed intelligence and technology in the crucible of the Deathworld's unforgiving environment? Or were they something else entirely, an alien presence that had taken root on this world and made it their own? The implications of either possibility were staggering. If the creatures were native to Earth, it meant that the planet's evolutionary pressures were even more extreme than they had ever imagined, capable of giving rise to intelligence and civilization in even the most unlikely of forms. And if they were alien, well, that opened up a whole new realm of questions and possibilities. As the ship hurtled through the void, the students lost themselves in the thrill of discovery, their minds racing with visions of the papers they would write, the accolades they would receive. They had stumbled upon something truly extraordinary, a find that would shake the very foundations of xenobiology. But amidst the excitement and the speculation, there was an undercurrent of unease as well. They had seen firsthand the power and the ferocity of the swarm, had felt the primal terror of being hunted by an intelligence beyond their understanding. And they knew deep in their hearts that they had barely scratched the surface of what this world had in store. When they finally arrived back at the institute, they were greeted as heroes. News of their discovery had spread like wildfire, and the halls were abuzz with talk of the Deathworld xenobiologists and their groundbreaking find. But even as they basked in the glow of their newfound fame, the students couldn't shake the feeling that they had unleashed something far beyond their control. They had brought back samples and recordings, yes, but they had also brought back questions, mysteries that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. In the weeks and months that followed, the institute was a hive of activity. Teams of researchers pored over the data the students had collected, analyzing every scrap of information for clues to the nature of the insectoid swarm. And the more they learned, the more unsettling the picture became. The creatures were like nothing they had ever seen before, their biology and behavior defying every known law of evolution and ecology. They seemed to possess a hive intelligence far beyond anything previously observed, able to coordinate and strategize on a level that bordered on the supernatural. And the more they studied the samples brought back from the death world, the more apparent it became that the creature's technology was not just advanced, but fundamentally alien, operating on principles that defied the most basic laws of physics. As the mysteries deepened, so too did the sense of unease among the xenobiologists. They had set out to study the death world to unravel the secrets of its deadly ecosystem, but now, they found themselves wondering if they had bitten off more than they could chew. And then, the disappearances began. It started with a few isolated incidents, a researcher failing to show up for work, a student vanishing from their dormitory. But as the weeks wore on, the numbers began to grow, until it seemed like hardly a day went by without another colleague or friend gone missing. At first, the institute tried to keep the matter quiet, not wanting to cause undue alarm or attract unwanted attention. But as the situation worsened, rumors began to spread, dark whispers of a curse brought back from the death world, a malevolent force that had followed the xenobiologists home. Professor Zeke Slicks, ever the scientist, tried to quell the rumors with reason and logic. But even he could not deny the growing sense of dread that seemed to hang over the institute like a pall. Something was happening, something that defied explanation, and he feared that they were all in terrible danger. The truth, when it finally came, was worse than any of them could have imagined. The insectoid swarm, it seemed, was not content to remain on the death world. It had followed them back, hitching a ride on their ship and infiltrating the institute itself. And now, it was growing, spreading like a cancer through the halls and laboratories, a silent, invisible threat that struck without warning or mercy. The missing researchers and students had not simply vanished, they had been taken, absorbed into the swarm and transformed into something monstrous and inhuman. The xenobiologists, once so eager to unravel the mysteries of the death world, now found themselves in a desperate fight for survival against an enemy they could barely comprehend. They had brought the horror back with them, and now, it threatened to consume them all. Professor Zeke Slicks, his once boundless enthusiasm now tempered by grim determination, gathered the remaining students and researchers together. They were the last line of defense, the only ones who stood a chance of stopping the swarm before it spread beyond the institute and engulfed the entire galaxy. It would be a battle unlike any they had ever faced, a struggle against an enemy that defied every law of nature and reason. But they had no choice, they had started this, and now, they had to finish it. As they prepared for the final confrontation, Professor Zeke Slicks looked around at the faces of his colleagues and students, seeing the fear and determination etched in equal measure on their alien features. They had come so far, risked so much, and now, the fate of the galaxy itself rested on their shoulders. It was a burden that no one should have to bear. But as they steeled themselves for the horrors to come, Professor Zeke Slicks knew one thing for certain: no matter what happened, no matter what sacrifices they had to make, they would not let the death world win. They would fight, and they would prevail, or they would die trying. The Deathworld had tested them, pushed them to the brink and beyond. But they would not be broken. For they were xenobiologists, and the lure of discovery, the thrill of the unknown, was a fire that could never be extinguished. The swarm had come for them. And now, with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance, it was time to stand and fight. The halls of the Institute, once a beacon of learning and discovery, had become a nightmarish labyrinth of twisting corridors and abandoned laboratories. The swarm had spread like a plague, infesting every nook and cranny of the vast complex, turning it into a hive of alien horrors. Professor Zix and his team moved through the shadows, their weapons at the ready, their senses strained to the breaking point. They had seen what the swarm could do, had witnessed firsthand the terrible fate of those who were taken. They knew that they were walking into the maw of hell itself. But they had no choice. The swarm had to be stopped here and now, before it could spread beyond the Institute and consume the galaxy. They were the last line of defense, the only ones who stood a chance of ending this nightmare once and for all. As they delved deeper into the heart of the hive, the walls around them began to pulse and writhe with a sickening, organic rhythm. The very air seemed to vibrate with the hum of a million alien thoughts, the cacophony of mindless hunger and inhuman intelligence. And then, they saw them, the drones, the worker beings of the swarm. They were monstrous things, all chittering mandibles and glistening carapaces, their once humanoid forms twisted and warped into something out of the darkest depths of the subconscious. The xenobiologists opened fire, their weapons spitting bolts of searing energy into the oncoming horde. The drones fell by the dozens, their bodies exploding into showers of ichor and shattered chitin. But for everyone that fell, a dozen more surged forward, a relentless tide of horror that threatened to overwhelm them all. Professor Zix fought with a fury born of desperation, his tentacles lashing out with a speed and precision that belied his age. Beside him, Commander Stevens and the others fought with equal ferocity, their weapons flashing in the gloom, their battle cries echoing through the nightmarish halls. But it was a losing battle, and they all knew it. The swarm was too vast, too relentless. For every drone they felled, 100 more poured in to take its place. And all the while, the hive mind pulsed and throbbed around them, a malevolent presence that seemed to mock their efforts with its alien laughter. In the end, it was Vix who made the final stand. The crystalline xenobiologist, once so timid and uncertain, now burned with a fire that seemed to consume him from within. With a cry of defiance, he hurled himself into the heart of the swarm, his body glowing with a blinding, searing light. The explosion that followed was like nothing any of them had ever seen. It was a burst of pure, untrammeled energy, a supernova of light and sound that incinerated everything in its path. The drones, the hive, the very fabric of the Institute itself, all of it was consumed in the maelstrom, reduced to ash and dust in the blink of an eye. When the light finally faded, Professor Zix and the others emerged from the rubble, their bodies battered and bleeding, their minds reeling from the sheer, unimaginable scale of what had just transpired. Vix was gone and sacrificed in the conflagration, but his final act had saved them all, had burned the heart out of the swarm and scattered its remnants to the winds. It was a victory of sorts, but one that had come at a terrible cost. The Institute was in ruins, its hallowed halls reduced to rubble and ash. And the xenobiologists themselves were changed, scarred both physically and mentally by the horrors they had witnessed. But as they stumbled out into the light of a new day, they knew that their mission was far from over. The Deathworld had tested them, had pushed them to the very brink of destruction, but in the end, they had emerged stronger, more determined than ever to unravel its secrets. There would be other expeditions, other dangers to face. And there would be other losses, other sacrifices to be made along the way. But the xenobiologists knew that they could not turn back, could not rest until they had unlocked the mysteries that lay at the heart of the Deathworld and beyond. For they were explorers, pioneers on the frontiers of knowledge and understanding. And no matter how steep the odds, no matter how great the peril, they would continue to push forward, to seek out new worlds, new wonders, and new truths that lay waiting to be discovered. The Deathworld had shown them the depths of its horrors. But it had also shown them the heights of their own courage and resolve. And as they set their sights on the stars once more, the xenobiologists knew that they would never stop searching, never stop striving to unravel the secrets of the universe, no matter where the journey might take them. The swarm was gone, vanquished in the fires of Vix's sacrifice. But the lessons it had taught them, the terrible, awe-inspiring truths it had revealed about the nature of life and death, of evolution and intelligence, those would stay with them forever. And as they looked to the future, to the untold wonders and horrors that lay ahead, the xenobiologists felt a sense of exhilaration, of purpose and destiny. They had been tested in the crucible of the Deathworld, had emerged stronger and wiser for it, and now, they were ready to take on the universe itself. The mission had changed them, had forged them into something new and extraordinary. And as they set out into the unknown once more, they knew that they would never be the same, that the secrets of the Deathworld would forever be a part of them, driving them onward to new heights of discovery and understanding. The future was uncertain, the path ahead fraught with peril and wonder in equal measure. But the xenobiologists were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to unravel the mysteries that lay at the very heart of existence itself. And as they embarked on this new journey, this grand adventure into the very fabric of the cosmos, they knew that they would never be alone, that the bonds forged in the fires of the Deathworld would sustain them, would guide them through whatever trials lay ahead. For they were xenobiologists, and the universe itself was their destiny. In the weeks and months that followed, the Institute slowly began to rebuild, both physically and psychologically. The scars left by the swarm's attack would never fully heal, but under Professor Slix's tireless leadership, the xenobiologists slowly started to piece their shattered world back together. There were memorials to the fallen, ceremonies of remembrance and mourning for those who had given their lives in defense of the Institute and the galaxy beyond. Vix was hailed as a hero, his sacrifice commemorated in song and story, his name inscribed in the annals of xenobiology for all time. But even as they honored the past, the survivors knew that they could not afford to dwell on it. The Deathworld had shown them the true face of the universe, a face of wonder and terror, of boundless possibility and existential threat. And they knew that they had to be ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. And so, they threw themselves into their work with a renewed sense of purpose and urgency. They studied the samples and recordings they had brought back from the Deathworld with a fresh eye, seeking to unravel the secrets of the swarm and the strange, alien technology it had wielded. They pored over the data, analyzing every scrap of information for clues to the nature of the threat they had faced. And slowly, painstakingly, they began to piece together a picture of a universe far stranger and more dangerous than any of them had ever imagined. The swarm, it seemed, was just the tip of the iceberg, a single manifestation of a vast and ancient intelligence that had been evolving in the depths of space for eons. An intelligence that saw the galaxy not as a place of wonder and discovery, but as a resource to be consumed, a feast for its insatiable hunger. The implications were staggering. If the swarm was just a scout, the vanguard of this greater threat, then the galaxy itself was in mortal peril. The xenobiologists knew that they had to act, had to find a way to stop this menace before it could spread and consume everything in its path. But how could they hope to stand against such a thing? They had barely survived their encounter with a single swarm. How could they possibly hope to defeat an entire civilization of such beings? The answer, when it came, was as shocking as it was unexpected. In their studies of the swarm's technology, the xenobiologists had stumbled upon a discovery that would change the course of galactic history, a way to turn the swarm's own weapons against it. It was a risky gambit, a plan that would require them to venture once more into the heart of the Deathworld and beyond. But it was their only hope, the only way to stop the swarm and its ilk before it was too late. And so, with heavy hearts and steely determination, the xenobiologists began to prepare for their greatest challenge yet. They would return to the death world, would delve once more into the nightmare realm that had nearly claimed their lives, but this time, they would not be going alone. They reached out to their allies across the galaxy, to the great powers and civilizations that had a stake in the fate of the cosmos itself. And to their amazement and relief, they found that they were not alone, that there were others who had seen the signs, who had sensed the growing danger on the horizon. Together, they forged an alliance, a coalition of the willing, a band of brothers and sisters united in their determination to save the galaxy from the menace that threatened to consume it. And at the head of this alliance, leading the charge against the darkness, were the xenobiologists themselves, the ones who had faced the swarm and lived to tell the tale. It was a desperate plan, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of a war that had been raging in secret for centuries. But it was their only hope, the only way to ensure that the sacrifices of the fallen had not been in vain. And so, with a final farewell to the shattered remnants of the Institute, the xenobiologists set out once more into the unknown, their hearts heavy with the weight of the task before them, but their spirits unbowed and unbroken. They would face the death world again, and this time, they would not be content merely to survive. They would fight, with every ounce of strength and courage they possessed, to turn back the tide of darkness and save the galaxy from the fate that awaited it. It was a battle that would rage across the stars, a struggle that would echo through the ages. And at its heart, leading the charge, would be the xenobiologists, the ones who had stared into the abyss and emerged changed, but unbroken. They were the galaxy's last hope, the only ones who could stand against the coming storm. And they would not fail, for the sake of all that they held dear, for the memory of the fallen, and for the future that hung in the balance. The death world had tested them, had forged them in the fires of adversity and sacrifice. But it had also given them the strength, the knowledge, and the resolve they would need for the battles ahead. And as they set out on this final mission, this last great adventure, the xenobiologists knew that they were ready to face whatever terrors lay ahead, ready to make the ultimate sacrifice for the sake of the galaxy they called home. Their journey had begun on a world of death and danger, a place where every moment was a struggle for survival. But it would end in the light of a new dawn, a dawn of hope and possibility, of a future free from the shadow of the swarm. And as they embarked on this final voyage, the xenobiologists knew that they carried with them the hopes and dreams of an entire galaxy, a galaxy that would forever remember their courage, their sacrifice, and their unbreakable spirit in the face of the greatest threat any of them had ever known. The death world had made them who they were, had given them the strength and the knowledge they needed to face the darkness ahead. And now, as they set out to meet their destiny, the xenobiologists knew that they would never forget.